Hello friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channels. TV friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I am also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. This video is produced by ZemTV. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it all. The interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star actor's performance in the film, and which character has played which role. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will give you a small review of the story of this film. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is a 2021 American superhero film based on Marvel Comics featuring the character Shang-Chi. Produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures, it is the 25th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The film was directed by Destin Cretton from a screenplay he wrote with Dave Callaham and Andrew Lanham, and stars Simu Liu as Shang-Chi alongside Awkwafina, Meng'er Zhang, Fala, Chen, Florian, Munteanu, Benedict Wong, Yuanhua, Michelle Yeoh, Ben Kingsley, and Tony Leung. In the film, Shang-Chi is forced to confront his past when his father Wenwu Leung, the leader of the Ten Rings terrorist organization, draws Shang-Chi and his sister Xialing Zhang into a search for a mythical village. A film based on Shang-Chi entered development in 2001, but work did not begin in earnest until December 2018, when Callaham was hired. Cretton joined in March 2019, and the film's title and primary cast were announced that July. This revealed the film's connection to the Ten Rings organization, which previously appeared throughout the MCU, and its leader Wenwu, who was adapted from the problematic comic book characters Fu Manchu and the Mandarin. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is the first Marvel Studios film with an Asian director and a predominantly Asian cast. Filming began in Sydney in February 2020, but was put on hold in March due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Production resumed in August and ended in October, with additional filming in San Francisco. Brad Allen and other members of the Jackie Chan stunt team coordinated the fight sequences. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings premiered in Hollywood, Los Angeles, on August 16, 2021, and was released in the United States on September 3rd as part of Phase 4 of the MCU. It grossed over $432 million worldwide, making it the ninth highest-grossing film of 2021. It set several box office records and received positive reviews from critics, many of whom praised the exploration and representation of Asian culture, which differentiated the film from the rest of the MCU, as well as the action sequences and Leung's performance. The film received various accolades, including a nomination for Best Visual Effects at the 94th Academy Awards. A sequel is in development. Plot: 1,000 years ago, Xu Wenwu discovers the mystical Ten Rings, which grant godly powers, including immortality. He establishes the Ten Rings organization, conquering kingdoms and toppling governments throughout history. In 1996, Wenwu searches for Ta Lo, a village said to harbor mythical beasts. He travels through a magical forest to the village entrance, but is stopped by a guardian, Ying Li. The two soon fall in love, but the Ta Lo villagers reject Wenwu, so Li chooses to leave with him. They marry and have two children, Shang-Chi and Xialing. Wenwu abandons his organization and locks away the Ten Rings. When Shang-Chi is 7 years old, Li is murdered by Wenwu's enemies, the Iron Gang. Wenwu dons the rings once again, massacres the Iron Gang, and resumes leadership of his organization. He makes Shang-Chi undergo brutal training in martial arts, but does not allow Xialing to train, prompting her to secretly teach herself. When Shang-Chi is 14, Wenwu sends him to assassinate the Iron Gang's leader. After completing his mission, a traumatized Shang-Chi runs away to San Francisco and adopts the name Sean. In the present day, Shang-Chi works as a parking valet with his best friend Katie. They are attacked on a bus by the Ten Rings organization, who steal a pendant that Li gave to Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi travels to Macau to find Xialing, fearing that the 10 Rings will go after her matching pendant. He reveals his past to Katie, who insists on helping him. They find Xiaoling at a secret fight club which she founded after escaping from Wenwu at 16. The 10 Rings attack the fight club and Wenwu arrives to capture Shang-Chi, Katie, Xiaoling, and her pendant. At the 10 Rings compound, Wenwu uses the pendants to reveal a mystical map leading to Ta Lo. Wenwu explains that he has heard Li calling and believes she has been held captive in Ta Lo behind a sealed gate. He plans to destroy the village unless they release her. When his children and Katie object, he imprisons them. They meet former actor Trevor Slattery, whom the 10 Rings imprisoned for impersonating Wenwu, and his Hundun companion Morris. They escape, and Morris guides them to Ta Lo, which exists in a separate dimension with various Chinese mythological creatures. The group meet Li's sister Ying Nan, who explains the history of Ta Lo. Thousands of years ago, the village's universe was attacked by the soul-consuming Dweller in Darkness and its soul eaters, but was saved by a Chinese dragon called the Great Protector, who helped seal the Dark Gate to the Dweller's world. According to Nan, the Dweller in Darkness has been impersonating Li, so Wenwu will use the 10 Rings to open the gate. Shang-Chi, Xiaoling, Katie, Slattery, and Morris join the villagers in training and preparing for Wenwu's arrival, using outfits and weapons crafted from dragon scales that are effective against the Soul Eaters. Wenwu and the 10 Rings arrive and attack. Wenwu overpowers Shang-Chi, pushes him into the nearby lake, and attacks the gate with the rings. This allows some of the Dweller's Soul Eaters to escape, with the 10 Rings allying with the villagers to effectively fight them. The Great Protector revives Shang-Chi and bears him from the lake to battle the Soul Eaters. Wenwu and Shang-Chi fight once more, and Shang-Chi gains the upper hand but chooses to spare Wenwu. The Dweller in Darkness escapes from the weakened gate and attacks Shang-Chi. Wenwu saves Shang-Chi but is killed by the Dweller in Darkness. He bequeaths the rings to Shang-Chi before he dies. Shang-Chi, the Great Protector, Xiaoling, and Katie slay the Dweller in Darkness. Afterward, Shang-Chi and Katie return to San Francisco, where the sorcerer Wong summons them to Kamar Taj. In a mid-credits scene, Wong introduces Shang-Chi and Katie to Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers, and the group discusses the origins of the rings. They discover that the rings are acting as a beacon to something. In a post-credits scene, Xiaoling becomes the new leader of the 10 Rings, despite telling Shang-Chi that she would disband the organization and begins training women alongside men. Cast Simu Liu as Shang-Chi, a skilled martial artist who was trained at a young age to be an assassin by his father Wenwu. Shang-Chi left the 10 Rings organization for a normal life in San Francisco and changed his name to Sean. Director Destin Cretton characterized Shang-Chi as a fish out of water in the U.S. who attempts to hide that with his charisma and does not know who he really is. Cretton also compared Shang-Chi to Matt Damon's character Will Hunting from Good Will Hunting, 1997, with both characters combining masculinity and vulnerability and having secrets and superpowers that they do not understand. Cretton said the film was a journey for Shang-Chi to discover his place in the world, and Liu added that Shang-Chi's identity struggles are the core of the character rather than his martial arts skills. Liu performed many of his own stunts since the character does not wear a mask and put on 10 pounds, 4.5 kilograms of muscle for the role while working on his flexibility. Liu was knowledgeable in Taekwondo, gymnastics, and Wing Chun. Additionally, he trained in other various martial arts including Tai Chi Wushu, Muay Thai, Silat, Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, and street fighting for the film. Jaden Zhang and Arnold Sun portray Shang-Chi as a child and teenager, respectively. As Katie, a hotel valet and Shang-Chi's best friend in San Francisco who is unaware of his past. Awkwafina described Katie as relatable, with a real heart and dedication to Shang-Chi, who is thrust into a world where she doesn't really know what to do and is discovering things about herself. Katie has difficulty committing to a direction in her life, something Awkwafina felt was a relatable struggle for a lot of Asian Americans due to their own expectations as well as those of their parents and society. Meng'er Zhang as Xiaoling, Shang-Chi's estranged younger sister and Wenwu's daughter, who was excluded from the 10 Rings organization by her father due to his traditional gender bias. Shelling is an amalgamation of several comic book characters, particularly inspired by Zhang Baoyu. This was Zhang's first film role, and she said the character was vulnerable behind her tough exterior. She originally had a red streak in her hair, but Zhang asked for this to be removed during filming after discovering the style's association with the rebellious Asian girl stereotype. The streak was removed from existing footage in post-production with visual effects. For the role, Zhang trained in MMA, Tai Chi, and rope dart. Elodie Fong and Harmony. He portrays Xialing as a child and teenager, respectively. Fala Chen as Ying Li, Wenwu's wife and the mother of Shang-Chi, and Xialing, who was a guardian of Ta Lo. Chen studied Tai Chi for the role. Florian Munteanu as Razor Fist, a member of the Ten Rings who has a machete blade for his right hand. Benedict Wong as Wong, a master of the mystic arts participating in a cage fighting tournament with Emo Blonsky. Yuanhua as Guangbo, one of the leaders of Ta Lo. Michelle Yeoh as Ying Nan, a guardian of Ta Lo who is Shang-Chi and Xialing's aunt. Ben Kingsley as Trevor Slattery, an actor who previously took on the guise of the Mandarin and was abducted by the Ten Rings, becoming a court jester or Shakespearean fool for Wenwu. He has a close relationship with the mythical Hundun Morris and journeys to Ta Lo with Shang-Chi. Cretton felt it was essential to hear Slattery admit how ridiculous that whole Mandarin impersonation situation was, as seen in Iron Man 3, 2013, and the Marvel one-shot short film All Hail the King, 2014, feeling that having Slattery apologize for impersonating Wenwu was the perfect way to apologize for the racial stereotypes surrounding the Mandarin. Kingsley enjoyed revisiting and developing the character, with Cretton saying Kingsley was able to portray a Trevor who has actually benefited from being in prison and has come out a clean and sober version of himself. Tony Leung as Xu Wenwu, Shang-Chi and Xialing's father and the leader of the Ten Rings. Wenwu is an original character created for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, who replaces Shang-Chi's original comic book father Fu Manchu, a problematic character associated with racist stereotypes to whom Marvel Studios does not hold the film rights. In the film, Wenwu has taken on many different names, including the Mandarin, which is a name that producer Jonathan Schwartz noted comes with audience expectations due to its comic book history. He said Wenwu was a more complex and layered character than the comic book version, with Cretton adding that there were problematic aspects of the Mandarin's comic book portrayal that he wanted to change. He felt Leung avoided Asian stereotypes and a one-dimensional portrayal by bringing humanity and love to the role, describing Wenwu as a fully realized human with relatable reasons for his bad decisions. Leung did not want to approach the character as a villain, instead hoping to explore the reasons behind why he is a man with history who craves to be loved, describing him as a sociopath, a narcissist, and a bigot. This was Leung's first Hollywood film after a long career primarily in Hong Kong action cinema. Also appearing in the film are Ronnie Chiang as John, Xialing's right-hand man and announcer at her underground fighting club, Jodie Long as Mrs. Chen, Katie's mother, Dallas Liu as Rihua, Katie's brother, Paul He as Chancellor Huai, Sai Chin as Katie's grandmother, Andy Lei as Death Dealer, one of Wenwu's assassins who trained Shang-Chi in his youth, Stephanie Hsu and Kunal Dodecker as Sue and John, married friends of Shang-Chi and Katie, Zach Cherry as Clev, a bus rider who live streams one of Shang-Chi's fights after portraying a street vendor in 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming, and Dee Baker as the voice of Morris, a Hundun who befriends Slattery. Jade Sue reprises her role as a Black Widow named Helen from Black Widow 2021, while Tim Roth provides uncredited vocals for his The Incredible Hulk 2008 character Abomination. Mark Ruffalo and Brie Larson appear, uncredited, in the mid-credits scene, reprising their respective MCU roles of Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel. Production. Development. According to Margaret Loesch, former president and CEO of Marvel Productions, Stan Lee discussed a potential film or television series based on the Marvel Comics character Shang-Chi with actor Brandon Lee and his mother Linda Lee during the 1980s, with the intention of having Brandon Lee star as the character. Brandon's father, martial arts legend Bruce Lee, was the visual inspiration for artist Paul Gulacy when drawing Shang-Chi during his tenure on the Master of Kung Fu comic book in the 1970s. In 2001, Stephen Norrington signed on to direct a Shang-Chi film entitled The Hands of Shang-Chi. By 2003, it was in development at DreamWorks Pictures with Yuen Wu-ping replacing Norrington as director and Bruce C. McKenna writing the screenplay. Ang Lee joined the project as a producer in 2004, but it did not materialize and the rights to the character reverted to Marvel. In September 2005, Marvel chairman and CEO Avi Arad announced Shang-Chi as one of 10 properties being developed as films by the newly formed Marvel Studios, after the company received financing to produce the slate with Paramount Pictures as distributor. Marvel thought the character could make a great film despite being relatively unknown because he has a very Disney story in the comic books. The Ten Rings organization was introduced in Marvel Studios' first Marvel Cinematic Universe (MCU) film, Iron Man 2008, without its leader, the Mandarin. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige felt they could not do the character justice in the Iron Man films because they focused on Tony Stark, Iron Man, and planned to introduce him in a later film instead. According to Chris Fenton, former president of the Chinese-based film production company DMG Entertainment, that was in talks with Marvel Studios to co-produce their films, Marvel offered to create a teaser featuring either Shang-Chi or the Mandarin for the Chinese market that would be featured at the end of The Avengers 2012. DMG balked at the offer, since the Mandarin's negative stereotypical portrayal in the comics could potentially prevent the film from being released in China and risk DMG being shut down. The Mandarin would eventually appear in the DMG co-produced film Iron Man 3, 2013, portrayed by Ben Kingsley, but he is revealed to be an actor named Trevor Slattery, who was hired to pose as the Mandarin. Feige felt this did not necessarily mean a more faithful version of the character did not exist in the MCU, and this was confirmed in the Marvel one-shot short film All Hail the King 2014, in which Kingsley reprised his role as Slattery. By December 2018, Marvel had fast-tracked development of a Shang-Chi film with the intent of making it their first film with an Asian lead. Marvel hired Chinese-American writer Dave Callaham to write the screenplay and began looking at Asian and Asian-American filmmakers to potentially direct the film. The studio's goal was to have Asian and Asian-American filmmakers explore themes related to their culture as they had done for African and African-American culture with Black Panther earlier in 2018. Development of the film also came following the success of the film Crazy Rich Asians that was likewise released earlier in 2018 and led to several other Asian-led properties being developed by Hollywood studios. Callaham's script was expected to modernize elements of the comic book story, which was first written in the 1970s, to avoid what modern audiences would consider to be negative stereotypes. When Callaham began work on the script, he became emotional realizing it was the first project where he was asked to write from my own experience, from my own perspective. Jessica Gao, who would later become the head writer of the Marvel Studios television series She-Hulk, Attorney at Law 2022, also presented a pitch for the film. Richard Newby of The Hollywood Reporter said the film could break out in a way similar to Black Panther by bringing a new perspective to the character. Newby felt Shang-Chi could have worked well as a television series and said it speaks volumes that Marvel would decide to make a feature film about the character instead. Newby concluded that the film was an opportunity to avoid stereotypes about Asian martial artists and be more than Marvel's Bruce Lee. Marvel Studios hired Japanese-American filmmaker Destin Daniel Cretton to direct the film in March 2019. Deborah Chow, who previously directed episodes of Marvel Television's Iron Fist 2017-2018 and Jessica Jones 2015-2019 series, Justin Tipping and Alan Yang were also considered. Cretton had previously not been interested in directing a superhero film, but was drawn to the project to help create a world and character that Asian children could look up to and see themselves in. His pitch included visual inspiration from Chinese, South Korean, Japanese, and other Asian cinema, including anime, to highlight a tone that showed the drama and the pain of life, but also showed the humor of life. In April, Marvel Studios and Australian Arts Minister Mitch Fifield announced that an upcoming Marvel film, believed to be Shang-Chi, would be filmed at Fox Studios Australia in Sydney and on location throughout the state of New South Wales. The production received $24 million, $18 million in one-off funding from the Australian government, as well as backing from the $10 million Made in SWAJ State Fund. The production was expected to generate a $150 million, $113 million for the Australian economy, as well as 4,700 new jobs, while taking advantage of around 200 local businesses. Don Harwin, the New South Wales Arts Minister, confirmed in July that this film was Shang-Chi and it would be produced back-to-back with Marvel Studios' Thor, Love and Thunder, 2022. Production on Shang-Chi was set to begin in early 2020 and be completed later that year. Pre-production. Casting. Marvel Studios began testing actors in their 20s for the role of Shang-Chi in mid-July 2019, including Louis Tan and Simu Liu. Tan previously portrayed Zhou Cheng in Iron Fist. The studio was adamant that actors be of Chinese descent to audition for the character. Liu was considered earlier in the audition process and was brought back in for a second audition when the creatives were finding it difficult to cast the role. He tested again on July 14th and was officially cast on July 16th. Awkwafina, who was the first actor cast for the film, had chemistry tests with the potential actors and said, "It was apparent that Liu was Shang-Chi from the jump." Liu and Awkwafina's castings were announced by Cretton and producer Feige at Marvel Studios' San Diego Comic-Con panel on July 20th, where the film's full title was announced to be Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Feige noted the connection between this title and the Ten Rings organization that had appeared throughout the MCU. He said the group's leader, the Mandarin, would be introduced in this film, and Tony Leung had been cast in the role. Cretton had wanted to cast Leung, but was doubtful he would accept the part. Despite this hesitation, producer Jonathan Schwartz decided to contact Leung, and he accepted the role after a meeting with Cretton. In December, Feige said the film would feature a predominantly Asian cast. A month later, Michelle Yeoh entered talks for a role in the film. This was for a different character than Alita Ogord, who Yeoh had briefly portrayed in Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2, 2017. Jessica Henwick, who previously portrayed Colleen Wing in Marvel Television's Netflix series, was asked to audition for the role of Xialing in the film, but was concurrently offered the role of Bugs in The Matrix Resurrections, 2021. After being given an ultimatum to select one of the roles by the respective studios, Henwick chose the Resurrections part. This was partially because she hoped to reprise the role of Wing in a future MCU production. Newcomer Meng'er Zhang was eventually cast in the role. Kingsley reprises his role as Slattery in the film. The character's inclusion was planned early on to help fully explore the context of who the Mandarin is in the MCU. Schwartz called Slattery a secret weapon, whose introduction partway through the film moves it in a different direction and provides comic relief. Writing. In addition to Callaham, Cretton and Andrew Lanham also contributed to the screenplay for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings from a story by Callaham and Wenny. The film was described as a sweeping superhero epic that combines emotional family drama with gravity-defying martial arts action. Schwartz said much of Shang-Chi's arc within Marvel Comics is a family drama, and Cretton wanted to focus on that element for the film, exploring Shang-Chi's broken and abusive family background. Liu noted that the comic book backstory for Shang-Chi is not widely known like those for comic book characters such as Batman or Spider-Man, and that gave the film's writers freedom to take more creative liberties with the story. Cretton and Callaham were cognizant of some of the racial stereotypes surrounding the character in the comics, with Liu saying everyone involved was very sensitive to not have it go into stereotypical territory. Cretton believed the resulting script was a really beautiful update to the character from what began in the comics. Cretton felt the film told an authentic story about Asian identity. Callaham said there is no single Asian American voice, and he and Cretton contemplated how the film could speak to the wider Asian diaspora, and would be generally entertaining but also personal to all these people. Cast members Liu, Long, and Zhang contributed their own experiences coming from Canada, Hong Kong, and mainland China, respectively, to add to the authenticity of the film. Some aspects that were discussed regarding each scene were whether characters should be speaking in Mandarin Chinese or English, and the type of food served in the different households to ensure it felt authentic to whose house it was. The film's opening begins with narration entirely in Mandarin, which Nancy Wang Yuan, writing for IO9, said was a striking decision for an MCU film to begin in a language other than English and continue to do so for an extended period. Regarding the use of Mandarin in the film, Cretton said the choice of which language to use when was always rooted in just the logic of the characters and who would naturally be speaking what language. Zhang, whose first language is Mandarin, served as a dialect coach for the other actors. Shang-Chi further deals with some of the negative characterization around Asian Americans and languages by portraying its characters as having varied knowledge of Asian languages, as demonstrated by an exchange with Katie and the character John when John says he speaks ABC, American-born Chinese. Another such moment is when Shang-Chi teaches Katie how to pronounce his name, which serves as a meta moment to also aid the audience on learning the proper pronunciation of Shang-Chi. Cretton felt it was important to have many strong women around Shang-Chi that were kicking his butt into gear, in contrast to the relationship between Shang-Chi and his father Wenwu, the film's version of the Mandarin. These supporting characters also have their own narrative arcs. Cretton's three sisters and his wife helped inspire the characters: Katie, Xiaoling, Yingnan, and Yingli. Speaking to the relationship between Shang-Chi and Katie, Cretton enjoyed being able to show a strong, deeply caring friendship that is rarely seen in superhero films, adding that it would have felt forced to have the two characters end up in a romantic relationship together. Yo requested a scene be added between her character Yingnan and Zhang's Xiaoling that would empower Xiaoling to step out of the shadows for the first time. This scene became an important part of Xiaoling's journey in the film and was one of the many scenes that also addressed the sexism presented in the story. Cretton felt seeing Xiaoling become the new head of the Ten Rings organization in the film's post-credits scene was reflective of her beginning to take control of her life. Various versions of the scene existed throughout the production before it was moved to be after the credits, since they thought it was a juicy idea for where the story might go in the future. Design. Sue Chan served as production designer for the film. The first location that she and the crew scouted was San Francisco, where Chan previously lived. She suggested Clement Street, the old Chinatown of San Francisco, as the character's home because it does not have the expected Chinatown cliches. The film's San Francisco apartment set was one of Chan's favorites due to its accuracy to real Asian American houses. Another favorite was a restaurant set where Wenwu kills his enemies, for which Chan took inspiration from Hong Kong gangster films. Cretton wanted Xiaoling's fight club to be fun and show her character rather than be scary and dangerous. Chan noted that Xiaoling's office combines imagery of skulls with flowers and bold colors, and the sets incorporate the character's feminist views. The fighting arena is an octagon because the number 8 is significant in Asian cultures. For Ta Lo, Chan researched ancient Chinese culture and designs and took elements from many eras, since the village is not from a specific time in Chinese history. These elements include symbolism, styles, and colors from the Tang and Song dynasties. Key symbols for the village were the 5 Chinese elements of wood, water, fire, metal, and earth, with metal being replaced with dragon scales for the film. These elements were used as the basis of the village set, along with traditional construction elements such as bamboo. Both real and artificial bamboo was used. The village itself was built in an open area by a reservoir outside of Sydney, and all of the buildings in the village were planned, built, and dressed as they would be used by the inhabitants. These include a pottery shed, a cooking shed, and a schoolroom, all built around the central temple, which is open on all sides and contains the history of Ta Lo. Ta Lo's universe is inhabited by various Chinese mythological creatures, including dragons, Fenghuang, Shishi, Hundun, Juweihu, and Qilin. Andy Park led Marvel Studios' visual development team for the film and specifically designed Shang-Chi's hero costume. The costume combines elements of his own style with those from both his parents. The jacket is made from the Ta Lo dragon scales and is a gift from his mother. He receives the 10 rings from his father at the end of the film, and he wears his own American shoes. Costume designer Kim Barrett also researched ancient Chinese designs and then adapted these to suit the film's stunt needs. The 10 Rings logo that was originally designed for the MCU featured a circle of 10 interlocked rings with characters from the Mongolian language. The logo's appearance in Iron Man 3 drew ire from the Mongolian government, who felt the Mongolian scripts offensively tied the country's intangible cultural heritage to a terrorist group. The logo was updated for Shang-Chi to use inoffensive Chinese characters instead, including synonyms for strength or power, written in ancient seal script. Oyungerel Sedevdamba, Mongolia's former Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, believed the change was more to appease the Chinese market than the Mongolian government. The actual 10 rings are portrayed as bangles worn on the wrist rather than as finger rings like they are in the comics. Schwartz said multiple approaches to the rings were discussed, and the comic-accurate design looked a little goofy in practice, and was too similar to the Infinity Stones that appear throughout the MCU. The 10 Rings compound goes through 4 stages in the film that reflect Wenwu's character. It begins as a cold fortress that prominently features the 10 Rings logo. The compound then becomes a family home with bright colors, gardens, design elements from the Ta Lo village, and a mosaic of a phoenix replacing the 10 Rings logo. The color was then stripped from the sets to make it a desolate shell, as Wenwu mourns the death of his wife. And finally, elements of Xiaoling's Fight Club are introduced in the post-credit scene as she takes over the compound and makes it her own. Filming. Principal photography began in February 2020, shooting at Fox Studios Australia in Sydney and on location throughout the state of New South Wales, 61, under the working title Steamboat. William Pope served as cinematographer for the film, shooting on the Arri Alexa LF. Cretton chose Pope because he felt the cinematographer's style could be both naturalistic and heightened, and because of Pope's work on The Matrix 1999, which Cretton believed had the right tone for an MCU film focused on Asian and Asian American characters. Pope already wanted to work with Cretton after being impressed by his film Short Term 12, 2013. Cretton was inspired for his direction by Jackie Chan's filmography, the Ip Man series, Tai Chi Master 1993, and Kung Fu Hustle 2004, among others in the martial arts and kung fu genres, as well as anime and video games. On March 12th, after studios had started halting production on films due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Cretton decided to have himself tested for coronavirus after working closely with people who had potentially been exposed to it. This was a precaution due to Cretton having a newborn baby, and he self-isolated while awaiting these results. The test later came back negative. While Cretton was self-isolating, Marvel suspended first unit production for the film, but intended for other aspects such as second unit to continue as normal. On March 13th, the rest of the film's production was paused as Disney halted filming on most of its projects. Before the shutdown, Ronnie Chieng joined the cast in an undisclosed role. In early April, Disney shifted much of the MCU's Phase 4 slate of films due to the pandemic, moving Shang-Chi's release date to May 7, 2021. Work building sets for the film resumed at the end of July 2020, and by August 2nd, all cast and crew members had arrived to begin shooting in the coming days. Any cast and crew returning to Australia had to be quarantined for 2 weeks upon arrival before returning to work, according to Australia's COVID-19 guidelines. Later in August, Yeoh was confirmed to be appearing in the film. The next month, the film's release date was pushed back to July 9, 2021, after Black Widow was shifted to the May 2021 date. In October, filming took place in San Francisco. Due to the pandemic, crew in Australia could not travel to San Francisco for this filming. Shooting locations included the Russian Hill, No Valley, and Nob Hill neighborhoods, as well as Fisherman's Wharf and Ghirardelli Square. Filming wrapped on October 24, 2020. Choreography: Cretton wanted to use a range of different fighting styles in the film due to Shang-Chi being trained in different types of martial arts. These include the elegant, almost ethereal wushu style from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2000, and the kinetic fights of Jackie Chan's films. Supervising stunt coordinator Brad Allen, along with other members of the Jackie Chan stunt team, became responsible for making the different styles feel consistent, as well as containing elements of Hong Kong action cinema. Schwartz said there was a meaning for each fighting style in the film, and they helped to tell the story visually. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is dedicated to Allen, who died in August 2021. The bus fight sequence was part of Cretton's initial pitch for the film. He called it a what-if scenario that helped explain the kind of fight sequences he enjoyed. Ones where the stakes just keep rising as the fight continues. Once it was decided to include the sequence in the film and planning for it began, Cretton credited Allen for bringing the Buster Keaton-like physical comedy to the fight, mixed with setups and payoffs and stakes rising to almost ridiculous levels. The stunt team added a specific reference to Jackie Chan, who is known for this style of fighting, in which Shang-Chi takes off his jacket, spins it around while fighting, and puts it back on. Fight coordinator Andy Cheng said the whole sequence took over a year to plan, going through as many as 20 different iterations, with most of the differences pertaining to the fighting within the bus. He said figuring out how the bus would be sliced in half and choreographing a fight around that was the most difficult part. The stunt team put together 10 to 15 different stunt viz edits planning out the sequence. 2 buses were shipped to Sydney for filming the sequence's interior shots. These buses were taken apart and reassembled on a 15 feet, 4.6 meters high gimbal and a 3.3 feet, 1.0 meters high gimbal, with the windows and seats removed most of the time for safety. The sequence was partially completed when the production shut down for COVID, requiring those involved to retune once production resumed. Filming for the interior shots took around 6 weeks. The exterior shots were filmed in San Francisco with a different crew due to the pandemic. The visual effects team planned out the shoot remotely so the unit could get the footage that was needed. 4 more buses were used for this portion of the sequence, including one that was filmed crashing down a hill into several cars. The entire sequence was shot in 48 FPS to help with tracking and making adjustments, and was then converted back to 24 FPS. The shots in slow motion were shot at 250 FPS using a phantom camera. The sequence ends at a real intersection in San Francisco that was partially filmed in Sydney and combined with footage from San Francisco by the visual effects team. Cretton said there were some fudges in how accurate the sequence was to San Francisco. You can't go downhill for 6 minutes straight, but was mostly based on a real route, suggested by Chan. The bus is meant to be a Muni bus, but different branding was used due to that company not wanting to be associated with a crashing bus. Cretton initially told Leung that he would not need to fight due to Wenwu's use of the 10 rings, but the actor did ultimately have several fight sequences and only had 2 weeks to prepare for them. He said this was not difficult due to his experience acting in action films. The character's first action scene, where he falls in love with Ying Li, took specific inspiration from the wuxia style of films such as Hero, 2002, which Leung starred in, and he said filming the scene reminded him of his early career. The fight in Macau on scaffolding outside Xiaoling's Fight Club was filmed against blue screen on several sets of scaffolding, including one that was built on a 45-degree gimbal to achieve a specific shot with Xiaoling. The Kamehameha attack from the anime series Dragon Ball Z was an inspiration for the final fight between Shang-Chi and Wenwu, which Cretton also included in his pitch. Post-production. Nat Sanders and Elizabeth Ronald's daughter served as co-editors on the film alongside Harry Yoon. In December 2020, Marvel revealed roles for several cast members, including Awkwafina as Shang-Chi's friend Katie, Yeo as Jiang Nan, and Chiang as John John. They also announced the casting of Zhang as Xiaoling, Fala Chen as Jiang Li, and Florian Munteanu as Razor Fist. Munteanu was cast after Marvel Studios was impressed with his role in Creed II, 2018. In March 2021, The film's release date was pushed back once again to September 3, 2021, when Black Widow was shifted to the July 2021 date, and Dallas Liu was revealed to be appearing. The film's official trailer in June 2021 revealed that Benedict Wong would reprise his MCU role of Wong, and the character Emil Blonsky, Abomination, would be appearing alongside him. Abomination first appeared in The Incredible Hulk 2008, portrayed by Tim Roth, and Roth returned to provide uncredited vocals for the character in Shang-Chi. Feige enjoyed returning to the Abomination after over a decade since his last MCU appearance, especially with the fans recognizing and embracing the reference in the trailer. The characters were added to the film after Gao created a storyline for them in She-Hulk Attorney at Law, so the audience could be reminded of Abomination and get excited for their upcoming appearances in the series. Wong was thrilled to be part of the film, and the film's mid-credit scene, which features Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner and Brie Larson as Carol Danvers, was conceived late in production by Cretton to tease the origins of the 10 Rings. Several origins were written for the rings, but Callaham said none of these made a difference to the film's story, so they decided to leave the origin ambiguous, which meant it could be addressed in a later MCU project. Cretton hoped they could feature Wong in the scene and have him go to karaoke with Shang-Chi and Katie to sing Hotel California, but was unsure which additional Avengers characters would appear until late in post-production. Banner and Danvers were chosen since they each represent the science and space aspects of the MCU, respectively, and because their appearances align with other events in the MCU happening around the time of the scene. Cretton also jokingly acknowledged that Larson's appearance continued her streak of appearing in his films after the pair worked together on Short Term 12, The Glass Castle 2017, and Just Mercy 2019. Ruffalo and Larson filmed their roles in early 2021 during the film's additional photography. Feige said the scene indicated how important Shang-Chi is to the MCU, likening it to Nick Fury's appearance in the post-credits scene of Iron Man. Visual effects. Christopher Townsend was hired to be the visual effects supervisor for the film. He worked with 11 different vendors and also hired the Australia-based Joe Farrell to serve as an additional supervisor, working with another 5 vendors. They created more than 1,700 visual effects shots for the film. Farrell supervised the bus sequence in Sydney and remotely for the San Francisco portion of shooting, and said it was one of the most complicated sequences he and Townsend had worked on. The scene featured 168 shots, with 40 to 50 of them being mostly digital. The environment required digital pieces for the bus, buildings, and people. Farrell said the sequence's motion made editing difficult, especially in regards to the 9 passengers. They were mapped out to know where they were at all times, and sometimes were digitally moved around. Because the Macau fight takes place on scaffolding outside a glass building, Rodeo FX had to rotoscope around the actors and replace the entire background. A digital version of downtown Macau was created based on reference filming that Farrell again supervised remotely. The map to Ta Lo went through many iterations to determine how that information should be conveyed. Cretton felt the completed scene, which uses water effects, connected well to the story and was visually beautiful. The film's main on-end title sequence, designed by Perception, also focuses on the movement of water. Rising Sun Pictures contributed more than 300 visual effects shots to the film and was primarily responsible for creating Ta Lo. They based the geography of the forest on different locations in Southeast Asia and integrated this digital environment with some practical elements from material shot in Sydney. The team also worked with the Australian Institute for Machine Learning to develop an advanced technique for facial replacement, powered by artificial intelligence, which was used to replace the stunt doubles' faces with those of the principal actors for the action scenes. The Hundun Morris was inspired by Cretton's family dog, a 15-year-old Dachshund. Images of Hunduns, which do not have faces, were included during early development as potential inspiration for the film, and Cretton wanted to feature one in the film in some way after seeing them. Morris was a green screen blob during filming, with Cretton crediting Kingsley for helping to breathe life into him, making it feel as if Morris was a real character. Multiple different designs were tested for the character, including one that had him looking like a plucked chicken. But the creatives wanted to ensure Morris remained cute, which was challenging since a character's eyes and face help convey their emotion. As such, they relied on the look of his fur and feathers. Weta FX contributed more than 305 visual effects shots to the film, including creating the 10 rings. Weta visual effects supervisor Sean Walker said creating realistic-looking rings digitally was not complicated, but getting the correct movements for each character was. Shang-Chi uses the rings defensively, while Wenwu uses them in an aggressive manner. Feige initially wanted the energy of each ring to have its own color as a reference to the comic book rings, which each have a different ability, but they found this to be too distracting. Instead, the energy of the rings is based on who is using them, with warmer orange energy for Shang-Chi and a cooler blue color for Wenwu. Weta also created the Great Protector and the Dweller in Darkness for the final action sequence. The Great Protector's scales were initially based on quartz, porcelain, and shells before the team found images of albino lizards, alligators, and snakes that they thought were the perfect reference for the creature. The dragon's hair was then simulated on top. In contrast, the Dweller in Darkness was based on rhino and elephant hides and armored lizards. The souls that the Dweller in Darkness and its soul eaters consume were intended to be colorful visualizations of chakras, but this was ultimately toned down to a more subtle effect. Music, main article, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Joel P. West, who scored Cretton's 4 previous films, returned to compose the score for Shang-Chi. He acknowledged that this was the biggest film he had ever worked on. West began working on the film when Cretton was hired and developed his ideas throughout the filmmaking process. He wrote ominous and dominating music for Wenwu and more ethereal music for Ying Li, and then combined these to create Shang-Chi's music since the story is about him accepting both sides of his family. West spent months researching Chinese music so he could incorporate traditional Chinese elements into the score, primarily for Ying Li and Ta Lo. Recording took place with a 70-piece London orchestra at Abbey Road Studios in London by June 2021, with the UK Chinese Ensemble also providing traditional Chinese instruments and performances for the score. An album featuring the film's score was released digitally by Marvel Music and Hollywood Records on September 1, 2021. Marvel Music, Hollywood Records, and Interscope Records also released 4 separate singles inspired by the film ahead of its release. Lazy Susan by 21 Savage and Rich Brian, Every Summertime by Nikki Run It by DJ Snake, Rick Ross and Rich Brian, and In the Dark by Sway Lee and Jhené Aiko. A soundtrack album was released on September 3rd, containing these in addition to songs by J.J. Lin, Saweetie, Anderson .Paak, and other members of the next generation of Asian artists. This was produced by Sean Miyashiro and 88 Rising, who worked with Cretton to tell a story in the album about the Asian American experience with particular inspiration from San Francisco, because that city is featured in the film. Marketing. On April 19, 2021, which was Liu's birthday, he shared the first teaser poster for the film. This was shortly followed by Marvel releasing the first teaser trailer. Adam B. Vary of Variety felt it was gratifying to finally see Liu in action as Shang-Chi, and highlighted how the teaser provided further insight into details such as how the film would depict the Mandarin wearing the 10 rings. Cole Delbeek at HuffPost said the eye-popping action was unlike anything seen in past MCU films. Writing for IO9, Rob Bricken felt the teaser did not disappoint with its action, but the family drama was what made the film look compelling to him. Collider's Adam Chitwood called the teaser pretty fantastic, comparing its story and tone to Black Panther, and saying Shang-Chi looked to be an exciting, fresh, and new Marvel Cinematic Universe experience. Based on the teaser, reactions to the poster and trailer in Chinese-speaking regions in East Asia were more critical, with commentators believing both presented a stereotypical view of Chinese people and culture. The film's first full trailer was released on June 24, 2021, during ESPN's NBA Countdown. Sean Keane at CNET enjoyed seeing more of Long in the trailer and called the fight sequences super impressive. He was surprised by the inclusion of Abomination at the end of the trailer and noted that the character looked more like his design from the comics than when he appeared in The Incredible Hulk. Digital Spy's Gabriella Geisinger felt the Abomination's role in the film would just be a cameo appearance to set up the character's story in She-Hulk Attorney at Law, but also felt it could have wide-reaching implications for the MCU. Germaine Lussier of IO9, Susanna Polo of Polygon, and Jennifer Ouellet of Ars Technica all felt the trailer was a better showcase for Shang-Chi than the teaser was, with Ouellet highlighting the different narration for the trailer that expanded on Shang-Chi's family background. Lussier also noted a lot of new visual effects in the trailer that were not in the teaser, and felt Shang-Chi would soon become a big star despite not being a well-known character. On August 15, 2021, Ron Hahn created a GoFundMe drive to raise money for Asian American Pacific Islander API children at the Boys and Girls Club in San Gabriel Valley to see Shang-Chi, as well as a larger Shang-Chi challenge for other people to create similar drives for their communities. The challenge was inspired by a similar one created for Black Panther. By the end of the month, API nonprofit organization Gold House partnered with GoFundMe to create the Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings Gold Open Community Fund to raise money for private screenings of the film for the API community and nonprofit groups. An episode of the series Marvel Studios' Legends was released on September 1st, exploring the Ten Rings organization using footage from its previous MCU appearances. Beginning September 3rd, Shang-Chi and Death Dealer began appearing in Disneyland's Avengers Campus. Promotional partners for the film included Sanzo Beverages, which released a limited edition version of lychee flavor, Microsoft, BMW, which acted as the film's global car sponsor and had the BMW iX3 and BMW M8 appear in the film, Old Spice, and international sponsors including Visa, Virgin Plus, Grupo TIM, Micron Group, and BGF. Release: theatrical. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings had its world premiere at the El Capitan Theater and TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood, Los Angeles, on August 16, 2021, and was screened at CinemaCon on August 25th. The film was released in international markets beginning on September 1st and had been released in 66% of its markets by the end of its first weekend. The film was released in the United States on September 3rd in over 4,200 theaters, of which 400 were IMAX, over 850 were premium large format, 1,500 were 3D, and an additional 275 were the D-Box, 4DX, and ScreenX formats. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is part of Phase 4 of the MCU. Shang-Chi was previously scheduled to be released on February 12, 2021, the first day of the Chinese New Year, before it was shifted to May 7th and then to July 9th, delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The film shifted once again in March 2021 to the September 2021 date after Black Widow was moved to the July 9th release date. In Australia, Shang-Chi was released on September 2nd, with a planned release in New South Wales, Victoria, and Australian Capital Territory on September 16th because of COVID-19 related state lockdowns. T was ultimately released in New South Wales on October 11th, when theaters in the state reopened. The film had a 45-day exclusive theatrical release rather than being released simultaneously in theaters and on Disney Plus with premiere access like Black Widow was. In August 2021, with the increase of COVID-19 Delta variant cases, Disney CEO Bob Chapek explained that the film would stay theatrical only for its 45-day window due to logistical reasons, and said this window was an interesting experiment for the company to learn more on how consumers wish to view their films. Liu took issue with Chapek calling the film an experiment, but Feige later stated that Liu's response appeared to be based on a misunderstanding of Chapek's intention. In May 2021, a Chinese state media report excluded Shang-Chi as well as Marvel's Eternals from its list of upcoming MCU films being released. Variety noted that this added to rumors that the films would not be released in China. In September 2021, Deadline Hollywood reported that a theatrical release in China was unlikely due to comments Liu made in an interview with the CBC in 2017, which referenced his parents' negative experiences living in China. Disney still listed the film's release in China as to be determined in October, but it ultimately did not receive a theatrical release in the country. Home media. The film was released on digital download on November 12, 2021, as well as on Disney Plus as part of the service's Disney Plus Day celebration. Disney Plus also received the IMAX enhanced version of the film. It was released on Ultra HD Blu-ray, and DVD on November 30th. The home media of the film includes audio commentary, deleted scenes, a gag reel, and various behind-the-scenes featurettes. Following the release of Shang-Chi on Disney Plus, viewer tracking application Samba TV reported that over 1.7 million U.S. households watched the film within its first weekend of availability. Samba TV also reported viewership numbers for the United Kingdom, 250,000, Germany, 85,000, and Australia, 17,000, while TV Time reported that it was the most streamed film in the United States during that same time frame. Nielsen stated that it was the second most streamed film behind Netflix's Red Notice, with a viewership of 1.72 billion minutes in its first week. Asian Americans made up 10% of the audience, the highest percentage for any title on the chart. The film remained in the top 5 on Nielsen and TV Time's charts in the following weeks, and TV Time stated that it was the 6th most streamed film globally in 2021. The film was number 1 on the NPD VideoScan First Alert chart, which tracks combined sales of DVDs and Blu-rays, and the dedicated Blu-ray sales chart for 2 weeks. T was the 3rd most selling title on disc for December 2021, according to the NPD Group. Reception. Office. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings grossed $224.5 million in the United States and Canada and $207.7 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $432.2 million. It became the highest-grossing film ever released on Labor Day weekend and earned $13.2 million worldwide from IMAX, another Labor Day weekend record. Shang-Chi earned $29.6 million on its opening day, which included $8.8 million from its Thursday night previews, the 3rd best opening day since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020. The Thursday night previews gross was the 2nd highest of the pandemic, behind Black Widow, $13.2 million. It grossed $75.5 million over its 3-day opening weekend, the 2nd largest of the pandemic behind Black Widow, $80.3 million. IMAX contributed $8 million, which was a record for a Labor Day weekend release. The film earned $94.67 million over the 4-day Labor Day weekend, surpassing Halloween's 2007 $30.6 million to become the largest Labor Day weekend opening ever. The film surpassed $100 million in 5 days, the fastest film to reach that milestone since Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker 2019 did it in its opening weekend. Shang-Chi remained the number 1 film in its 2nd weekend, earning $35.8 million, which was the largest 2nd weekend gross of the pandemic, and in its 3rd weekend, when it earned $21.7 million, the 2nd largest 3rd weekend gross for a September release behind It, 2017. It was the 3rd MCU film following Guardians of the Galaxy 2014 and Black Panther to remain the top film for 4 consecutive weeks, and was the first film of the pandemic era to surpass $200 million in the United States and Canada when it did so on September 30th. It was the 3rd highest grossing film in its 5th weekend, the 4th highest in its 6th weekend, and remained in the top 10 at the box office for 2 additional weekends. The film ended its run at the United States and Canada box office as the 2nd highest grossing film of 2021, behind Spider-Man: No Way Home. The film earned $56.2 million from 41 markets in its opening weekend, opening number 1 in many. The United Kingdom release had the largest opening day of the pandemic and the largest 3-day opening weekend of the pandemic, with $7.7 million. In Hong Kong, the film produced the largest September opening weekend, as well as the 2nd-best opening during the pandemic. Nancy Tartaglione of Deadline Hollywood noted South Korea's $6.5 million opening was an underperformance for the market and an MCU film, though it was the first Hollywood film to open at #1 there in several weeks. In its second weekend, the film earned $35.2 million from 42 markets, remaining #1 in several. In its third weekend, the film earned an additional $20.3 million from 43 markets and was still the top film in territories such as Australia, Brazil, Mexico, and the UK. The film remained at #1 in all of the territories in its fourth weekend, when it opened in Indonesia. It was #1 there as well with $1.2 million. Shang-Chi was the top film in Australia for 9 weekends, with its highest-grossing day coming on October 31, 2021. As of October 2021, the film's largest markets are the United Kingdom, $27 million, South Korea, $14.9 million, and France, $11.5 million. Critical response: the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes reported an approval rating of 92%, with an average score of 7.5 per 10, based on 344 reviews. The website's critical consensus reads, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings isn't entirely free of Marvel's familiar formula, but this exciting origin story expands the MCU in more ways than one. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 71 out of 100, based on 52 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Critics commonly praise the film's representation of Asian culture, which differentiated it from other MCU films, as well as the performances and action sequences, 194. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale, while PostTrack reported 91% of audience members gave it a positive score and 78% said they would definitely recommend it. Peter DeBrugge at Variety said the decision to give the second-tier Shang-Chi the same over-the-top treatment as major Marvel heroes had broadened Marvel Studios' cultural representation and would empower audiences of Asian descent in a similar way to what Black Panther did for audiences of African descent. Angie Han of The Hollywood Reporter felt the film did not combine its martial arts, fantasy elements, and exploration of Chinese and Asian American culture as smoothly as it should, but did find it to be a fresh and fun superhero film. Giving the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, RogerEbert.com's Nick Allen said the film fit within Marvel's formula but had a soulfulness that other MCU films, as well as superhero and action films in general, did not have. He concluded that Shang-Chi was not an experiment for Marvel and Disney, but rather a promising template for how they can get it right again. Writing for Empire, Laura Sirikul said the film was a winning blend of Chinese culture and the Marvel formula that avoided Asian stereotypes and called out some of Marvel's past racial errors. Francesca Rivera at IGN felt the film had successfully balanced the real-life complicated conflict between first-gen Asian American children and the wishes of their immigrant parents with the needs of an MCU film. Alexis Ned said Liu was flawless as Shang-Chi and compared his casting to that of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, Iron Man, and Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, Captain America in the MCU. Jake Cole of Slant Magazine was more critical, giving the film 1.5 out of 4 stars and criticizing Liu's performance as being curiously effectless. Cole also criticized the film's flashbacks, which he felt slowed the overall story down, but praised Leung as effortlessly conveying the calm malice with which Wenwu asserts his absolute power, as well as the anguish that the man feels over the loss of his wife. Allen said Leung was the film's most brilliant casting, and Han praised his performance for bringing sincerity to Wenwu, which made him a supervillain with a soul. Katie Rife at the AV Club said Leung exudes the type of movie star charisma critics sometimes complain is on the decline. Rife felt Leung was not being challenged by the material in the film, but was still able to bring emotional depth to Wenwu. Sirikul praised the performances of Liu, Awkwafina, and Leung, but felt some of the character arcs were undermined by the film's convoluted story and rushed ending. Entertainment Weekly's Leah Greenblatt highlighted Zhang, who she felt deserved her own spin-off, and Awkwafina. Rivera praised the film's action sequences as the best of the MCU so far, focusing on the choreography and cinematography, and particularly highlighting the wuxia-style fight between Wenwu and Li at the start of the film, but criticized the digital backgrounds in Ta Lo. Wenlei Ma at news.com.au also said the film's action had some of the best choreography of the MCU, Greenblatt praised the bus fight, Fight Club, and skyscraper fight sequences as astonishing set pieces, while Matt Goldberg at Collider also praised the action set pieces for combining classic kung fu movie influences with MCU visual effects. Peter Hartlaub of the San Francisco Chronicle said the bus fight was one of the best car chases in San Francisco movie history. Allen enjoyed the various fight sequences, saying Cretton changed the height, light, reflections, and staging for each. He described the film's final act as such an over-the-top, giddy roller coaster ride that you can't help but root for it. In contrast, Cole took issue with the amount of visual effects in the action sequences and said the final act devolves into loud and chaotic visual nonsense. At Film, Hoai Tran Bui also criticized the visual effects-heavy third act, but said the film had one of the more forgivable ones, if only because it verges on full fantasia, and praised the wuxia moments. Accolades. In December 2021, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings received the Vanguard Award at Unforgettable Gala's 19th Annual Asian American Awards, an honor previously held by the Farewell 2019. It's telling when the Marvel Cinematic Universe uses its immense power to operate an assembly line, but it's just as telling when there's a deeply human spark to one of their projects, allowing franchise values like great spectacle, striking performances, and intricate depictions of family to prevail. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is the latest addition to the latter category, taking after previous Marvel movies that introduced a vision and became benchmarks. Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Black Panther, and Thor: Ragnarok come to mind. Directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, this film fits into Marvel packaging in its own way, but it has an immense soulfulness that other MCU movies, superhero movies, and action movies in general should take notes from. Simu Liu stars as Shang-Chi, a key piece to a broken family that has a history of infighting. The dysfunctional family dynamics are even more important than the 10 rings that grant such immense power to Shang-Chi's power-hungry father Wenwu, who has lived for 1,000 years and created a society called the 10 Rings that has destroyed kingdoms and swayed the events all over the world. When Wenwu found love with Zhang Li, there was peace. They married and started a family. But after Shang-Chi's mother died, a newly monstrous Wenwu tried to mature his son by making him a killer, causing the young boy to leave behind his sister Xialing, Meng'er, and Wenwu. Cretton, who previously directed Short Term 12, an Avengers-like showcase of indie rising talent, Brie Larson, Lakeith Stanfield, Rami Malek, etc., keeps those visceral, personal stakes in this script by himself, Dave Callaham, and Andrew Lanham, so that the superhero context is a bonus to the drama. The film is a mega-budget ballet, one that glides and floats over an abyss of grief. This backstory comes for Shang-Chi, known as an American adult as Sean, when he rides the bus with his friend Katie, Awkwafina, up and down the hills of San Francisco. A group of henchmen attack Shang-Chi for a green pendant he wears around his neck, and in a beat that's prefaced like a power-up to Katie's funny surprise, Sean's immense courage suddenly comes to light. So too do his fighting skills, which help make for an incredible melee scene of hand-to-hand combat that has the camera gazing for long shots and freely going in and out of the moving bus, just like its impromptu hero. The scene lacks for its youch factor, especially compared to how nobody did the same thing with appropriate blood earlier this year, but it sidesteps that element by being fast-paced even longer than you think it'll be, and very funny. It's the birth of an action star in Liu, and an amazing debut for a character who will find himself in fight scenes here of escalating intensity. The power for this film, however, comes through in the eyes of his father, Wenwu. One of the movie's most brilliant choices is casting Tony Leung so that he can repeat the same magic he's had from countless romances and dramas in Hong Kong. Leung rules this movie. With the same silent passion and stillness that made In the Mood for Love one of the greatest romances of all time, Leung destroys armies, raises a family, and struggles to resist destructive grief. His presence is made all the more powerful by the 10 blue rings that help him slingshot around and destroy whatever is in his path. When he hears the voice of what could be his wife from behind a cave of rock, Wenwu becomes a Darth Vader-like tyrant, driving a campaign to rampage through the mother's magical home known as Ta Lo, in order to get to a cave that everyone else knows, including his son and daughter, has an apocalyptic, soul-sucking dragon inside. It's the best performance from the Marvel Cinematic Universe because the passion and grief it expresses is appropriately lung-sized. Cretton is able to take this enthralling movie from one scene to the next with this vivid sense of a brother and sister trying to stop their father from destroying everything because he can't move on. It's a more devastating threat than the usual world domination thing, and it parallels how the script builds out the painful backstory of Shang-Chi and his similarly skilled and aggrieved sister, Xia. With a few strong twists along the way, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings turns into an adventure and a homecoming to a peaceful realm from a whole different time, which brings in a sweet, magnetic performance from Michelle Yeoh. These passages, as balletic as the entire movie, detail how Shang-Chi learned two different fighting approaches, life philosophies really, from his mother and father. It doesn't seem like a coincidence that a massive Hollywood tentpole sincerely based on character-based kung fu has inspired such rich fight scenes, and it makes the film even more of a refreshing blast. Cretton and his team constantly play with height, light, reflections, and staging when it comes to orchestrating a fight set piece that surprises the audience, like a jaw-dropping, way-up-high nighttime battle royale on some scaffolding in Macau, and then foregrounds the choreography as the main spectacle. It's not just about who is throwing the punches and kicks. I should admit that numerous beats in these sharply edited sequences blew me back in my chair, an involuntary filmmaking nerd response I've had to similar movies that inspired this one. Skyfall, The Grandmaster, for starters. Shang-Chi's thrilling's embrace of clarity, of nudging your imagination instead of doing all the work for you, spreads the inspired special effects that enhance the magic of this story and the world of its characters. There's an evocative use of water. It bursts from walls, floats in the air, and makes a map of icicles. A striking way of depicting a moment that usually would just get a hologram. The movie even throws in a charming, animated, cute sidekick that cleverly subverts the expectations of cute faces on plush-looking sidekicks. The dominating usage of CGI, the kind that requires dark clouds, as we saw in the grand battle of Avengers Endgame, is saved for the last massive sequence, which is such an over-the-top, giddy roller coaster ride that you can't help but root for it. The Avengers, the new roster at least, lurk on the periphery of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, but Cretton's film benefits from establishing its deeper family and friend relationships. Liu and Awkwafina have adorable platonic chemistry as two valet workers who are thrust into another adventure, this one more intense than their karaoke nights. Awkwafina in particular becomes a vital source of levity for the script and a welcoming audience surrogate as the film ramps up to a large battle. She helps the humor pop even more compared to the story's darker themes, making numerous passages of the movie not only thrilling but charming and funny. As for Shang-Chi himself, well, take away the comic relief that lovingly dunks on him, or the battling schools of fighting from his parents that swirl within him, and there's not too much personality to the character. It's a distinct void when one reflects on the performance, given that Liu is so watchable in how he combines a striking, bulky presence with endearing innocence, a la Channing Tatum's own box office dominating days. It becomes telling of the imperfect balancing act of this script that its main character needs a little emphasis in his sequel. The same could be said for other intriguing characters like Xia, a vengeful badass in her own right, not given enough screen time or depth, especially considering where she ends up. Without spoiling, the movie does make some efforts to address Marvel's previously problematic presentations of Asian characters, and while the moments are used for some self-deprecating comic relief, they remind me of two things: how it's impossible for these Marvel films to exist in a vacuum, and how much more work needs to be done. Even the people who helped make this movie stumble through talking about it, like when Disney CEO Bob Chapek insensitively said this was an interesting experiment, a phrase that indicates a secondary status, something unofficial. The statement is ignorant in many ways, but especially after one witnesses the many triumphs of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It embraces fruitful ideas, big and small, whether in cohesive action scenes, embracing platonic friendships in a mega-budget movie, or introducing a new exciting hero who also has to instruct his friend and the audience on how to properly say his name. This movie is not an experiment for Marvel and Disney. It is a promising template for how they can get it right again. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings review. Although it often feels as though barely a month passes without another comic book movie puffed as a new pinnacle of achievement for the superhero genre, it's vanishingly rare for a film to actually deserve its hype. But Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings does so, and more. Director Destin Cretton, who co-wrote with Dave Callaham and Andrew Lanham, is canny enough to realize that the key to success with an effects-driven, eye-popping extravaganza is not the CGI spectacle, it's the basic stuff. Textured characters, karaoke and shots-fueled friendships, and electrifyingly badass fight choreography. In the goofy exchanges between Simu Liu's Sean, heir to his father's tricky relationship with power, and his mother's fierce empathy, and his best friend, defender, drinking buddy, and fellow valet car parker Katie, Awkwafina, the film is already one of the freshest Marvel pictures in a long time. And that's before the fight on a runaway bus featuring an Eastern European man mountain with a laser arm prosthesis. But perhaps what's more telling than where this film fits within the Marvel universe, it's an outlier, and all the better for it, is how elegantly it slots into the wuxia fantasy-infused Chinese martial arts tradition. Both in casting, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon's Michelle Yeoh as serene and deadly as ever, and heroes Tony Leung take key roles, and in set pieces there's a nod to the iconic bamboo forest sequence in House of Flying Daggers. The film takes its cues from the martial arts epics of the early 2000s. Paying homage without becoming derivative is a difficult balance, but the film succeeds. Likewise, Cretton negotiates potential cliches such as flashback sequences and that hoariest of old chestnuts, the training montage, with a gravity-defying lightness of touch. It's only at the very end, when the picture trades its focus on exquisite, thrillingly executed fight sequences for a battle between a bunch of special effects, that this exhilarating blend of genres loses a bit of its shine. Plot: Shang-Chi, the master of unarmed weaponry-based kung fu, is forced to confront his past after being drawn into the Ten Rings organization. Review. The trailers may have been a little underwhelming for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, but the film itself is a whole lot of fun, with Tony Leung stealing every moment he is on screen with his mere presence. Simu Liu is an appealing lead as Shang-Chi, even if he is a little bland, but the story has enough humor and surprising heart to keep you engaged. Awkwafina mostly provides the comic relief, even if a lot of her humor falls a bit flat, but she becomes far more interesting as the story progresses. Let's get to what we're all here for: the action. I'm pleased to say that the fight scenes, especially in the first half, are very well done with fluid camera work, and the scene near the beginning is pure wuxia, which I can take or leave sometimes, but in this case it was one of the most beautiful scenes in MCU history. The choreography throughout is first-rate, but I thought a few too many scenes took place at night or in the dark. The finale also has Shang-Chi facing off against a large monster, rather than the kung fu fight we really want to see. Most of the action is enhanced by CG, but one of the highlights was the bus fight from the trailers. I still think nobody had the better bus beatdown, though. It's a surprisingly soulful movie, which is mostly about grief and loss, but also overcoming fear and embracing your destiny. It is, for the most part, a breath of fresh air, and really doesn't feel like an MCU movie for the first half, and there are some wonderfully imaginative scenes. Tony Leung's Xu Wenwu was far more sympathetic than I had anticipated, and I found myself rooting for him more than I should have. Michelle Yeoh makes everything better, just bringing class and grace to any movie, so she was a welcome addition to Shang-Chi. There are some nice connections to the MCU as the film continues, and the 2 post-credit scenes are worth sticking around for, especially the first one. I like that the movie was dedicated to Brad Allen, who sadly passed away a few weeks back. The score wasn't particularly memorable, but it had its moments, and there was some awesome percussion, especially during the end credits. Overall, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is a welcome change of pace for the MCU, with some cool new characters and impressive fight scenes. It goes a bit too fantastical for the finale for my tastes, but I think some of you will love it, and it's worth seeing just to watch a master like Tony Leung at work. Shang-Hu. The most obscure Marvel Cinematic Universe character to get his own standalone movie to date, the comic book mega company's master of kung fu may not be a household name, not yet at least, but you wouldn't know that from Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, a flashy Asian-led visual effects extravaganza that gives the second-tier hero the same over-the-top treatment that big-timers like Hulk and Thor typically get. The result broadens the brand's spectrum of representation once again, offering audiences of Asian descent the kind of empowerment for which Black Panther paved the way a few years back. Whether in print or on screen, Marvel has consistently been a step ahead of culture at large, ensuring that women, people of color, and even queer characters feature prominently in its properties. As social pressures motivated Hollywood to diversify its roster, Marvel didn't have to look far to produce superheroes that gave more than just little white boys a chance to see themselves on screen. Even so, the nearly half-subtitled Shang-Chi marks a gamble of an entirely different order. With Henry Golding already committed to Snake Eyes, and few other bankable early 30s English-speaking actors to consider, the company cast a lesser-known leading man in Simu Liu, of Canadian sitcom Kim's Convenience. The real star here is Marvel, of course. Good on it for leveraging its popularity to help launch some fresh Asian talent, including indie director Destin Cretton. To mitigate the risk, Marvel tapped Asian action icons Michelle Yeoh and Tony Leung to play Shang-Chi's aunt and dad, respectively, and paired Liu with bigger-name Awkwafina as wisecracking bestie Katie. If the film's a hit, it'll send an even louder message to Hollywood than the success of Crazy Rich Asians did. And if it flops, well, that would tell us almost nothing, since Disney is releasing the movie exclusively to theaters in the midst of a pandemic. Stick around for the end credits, and cameos by a few of the Avengers hint at how Shang-Chi fits into the greater MCU. For the 2 hours prior, however, the movie may as well be spinning its own mythology, reaching back more than 1,000 years to ancient China, where Wenwu Long is already in possession of the 10 rings. These powerful, immortality-bestowing bracelets are the movie's answer to Star Wars lightsabers, a new form of weapon that glows blue on Wenwu's wrists and is controlled by his mind and sweeping arm gestures, resulting in all kinds of fancy tricks. From the outset, Cretton embraces the artificiality of CGI, establishing an aesthetic in which spectacle trumps plausibility. These are comic book movies, after all. Wenwu parts an army as Moses did the Red Sea and DeMille's the Ten Commandments, using his magic jewelry to easily breach a walled city. Centuries pass, and the shadow villain expands his reach around the world until, 30 years ago, with nothing left on Earth to conquer, he goes looking for a land called Ta Lo, meeting his match in its guardian, Fala Chen, whom he marries. In the comics, Shang-Chi's father was none other than the notorious Fu Manchu, and though that connection has been scrubbed here, the script, for which Cretton shares writing credit with Dave Callaham and Andrew Lanham, maintains the idea that Shang-Chi was raised by a dastardly figure he must eventually confront. Ancient Greek dramatic tropes imposed upon the Asian martial arts genre. From sun-up to sundown, we learn, this powermonger-turned-family man taught his son every possible way to kill a man. That means of all the Marvel heroes, Shang-Chi has perhaps the most dysfunctional upbringing yet. Small wonder, then, that Shang-Chi ran away to San Francisco, changed his name, but barely, as Awkwafina hilariously points out, and tried to forget it all with a dead-end job as a parking valet, which is how we meet him immediately following the movie's overlong but action-packed Wenwu prologue. Although ultra-likable Liu appears shirtless and handsome in his first scene, Shang-Chi is all but neutered compared with other studly Marvel heroes who all get girlfriends. That could be the movie's progressive, Frozen-like way of saying superheroes don't need love interests, but it plays into a troubling Hollywood tradition of denying Asians their sex appeal. one that Marvel could remedy by making a Namor Submariner movie. Cretton and his co-creators are smart enough to recognize the minefield of stereotypes the movie must navigate, finding clever and amusing tactics to deal with missteps in Marvel's pulp past. Spoiler alert, the company even brings back Ben Kingsley for some self-ribbing comic relief, addressing unresolved problems with the Mandarin character in the process. But in distancing itself from the Fu Manchu trap, the film unwittingly squanders Long's involvement. Here, he's an incredibly evil world terrorist turned softy who loses his way again after his wife's death. Now, beckoned by what he believes to be her voice, Wenwu arranges to steal the amulets that Li had given their two kids, Shang-Chi and his far more successful sister, Xialing, musical theater actor Meng'er Zhang making her screen debut. After fending off Dad's goons in a thrilling Donnybrook aboard an out-of-control city bus, Shang-Chi drags Katie to Macau, where he finds Xialing running an underground fight club 100 or so stories above street level in a half-constructed skyscraper. The early action scenes are the best, as Cretton and his second unit/VFX teams collaborate to make cartoonishly extreme choreography seem acceptable within the movie's elastic alternate reality. Whereas Black Panther invented the Afrofuturist kingdom of Wakanda as a fantasy answer to the Western world's visions of its own superiority, Shang-Chi acknowledges China as the global superpower that it is and merely has to find a way to get its characters back to the mainland. Marvel has been courting Sino audiences since at least Iron Man 3, which added China set scenes for its Asian release. That works just fine for the Macau sequences, although the movie veers in a different direction, trying to incorporate familiar wushu and anime elements when Wenwu uses the amulets to access Ta Lo, a vaguely lost world-like parallel dimension inhabited by fantastical creatures. There, an elite brigade of trained fighters, led by Yo and backed by a benevolent CG dragon, defend unsuspecting humans from a hellacious soul-sucking beast. Like virtually every standalone MCU movie to come before, Shang-Chi does a fine job of presenting its hero as a relatable everyman during the first half before spiraling off into bombastic, brain-numbing supernatural mayhem for the final act. Here, the movie has the added burden of trying to give Awkwafina something to do while giant creatures battle it out in the skies. It's great to see her in action, but confusing that we're being asked to view this goofball as Shang-Chi's equal rather than a sidekick. More confusing still is why Wenwu's slacker son, using rings for the first time, should turn out to be more skilled than his father. In its efforts to be inclusive, Marvel has all but obscured just how powerful its various characters are supposed to be relative to one another. Not that audiences seem to mind. Now that the Avengers Infinity War is played out, Marvel must figure out where this lucrative enterprise will go next. By expanding its idea of who can be a hero, the franchise appears egalitarian while bringing all new demographics under its control. The Grandmaster, for starters, Shang-Chi's thrilling's embrace of clarity, of nudging your imagination instead of doing all the work for you, spreads the inspired special effects that enhance the magic of the story and the world of its characters. There's an evocative use of water. It bursts from walls, floats in the air, and makes a map of icicles, a striking way of depicting a moment that usually would just get a hologram. The movie even throws in a charming, animated, cute sidekick that cleverly subverts the expectations of cute faces on plush-looking sidekicks, the dominating usage of CGI, the kind that requires dark clouds, as we saw in the grand battle of Avengers Endgame, is saved for the last massive sequence, which is such an over-the-top, giddy roller coaster ride that you can't help but root for it. The Avengers, the new roster, at least lurk on the periphery of Shanghai and the legend of the Ten Rings, but Cretton's film benefits from establishing its deeper family and friend relationships. Liu and Awkwafina have adorable platonic chemistry as two valet workers who are thrust into another adventure, this one more intense than their karaoke nights. Awkwafina in particular becomes a vital source of levity for the script and a welcoming audience surrogate. As the film ramps up to a large battle, she helps the humor pop even more compared to the stories. darker themes making numerous passages of the movie not only thrilling but charming and funny. As for Shani himself, well, take away the comic relief that lovingly dunks on him, or the battling schools of fighting from his parents that swirl within him, and there's not too much personality to the character. It's a distinct void when one reflects on the performance, given that Liu is so watchable in how he combines a striking bulky presence with endearing innocence. Channing Tatum's own box office dominating days, it becomes telling of the imperfect balancing act of this script that its main character needs a little emphasis in his sequel. The same could be said for other intriguing characters like Xiaoling, a vengeful badass in her own right, not given enough screen time or depth, especially considering where she ends up without spoiling the movie, does make some efforts to address Marvel's previously problematic presentations of Asian characters, and while the moments are used for some self-deprecating comic relief, they remind me of two things: how it's impossible for these Marvel films to exist in a vacuum, and how much more work needs to be done. Even the people who helped make this movie stumble through talking about it, like when Disney CEO Bob Chapek insensitively said this was an interesting experiment, a phrase that indicates a secondary status, something unofficial. The statement is ignorant in many ways, but especially after one witnesses the many triumphs of Shani and the legend of the Ten Rings. It embraces fruitful ideas big and small, whether in cohesive action scenes, embracing platonic friendships in a mega-budget movie, or introducing a new exciting hero who also has to instruct his friend and the audience on how to properly say his name. This movie is not an experiment for Marvel and Disney. It is a promising template for how they can get it right. Again, going to the movies has been a rare occurrence for me lately. I suspect that this is true for many others. So when I went to see Shani and The Legend of the Ten Rings, I was practically desperate to have a fun time seeing a bomb after a year and a half. Indoors would have been devastating. Luckily, I really enjoyed it. I will try to stay clear of spoilers in this review, as the film just came out. So to give a spoiler-free plot summary of Shang-Chi, our titular hero, played by Simu, is the son of Su Wenwu, a legendary centuries-old figure with a criminal empire. He raises his son to follow in his footsteps, training him in martial arts. Shani eventually runs away from his father, hoping to create a new life for himself. However, 10 years later, Shani must confront Su Wenwu in an international adventure. To put it plainly, it's the kind of fun someone can expect from a blockbuster Disney movie. Those looking for subversions of the genre or graphic violence will find themselves disappointed, with a few exceptions, mainly visual, but more on that later. It's standard fun for Marvel, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's adventurous escapism and a good time at the movies. Shani as a character was heavily inspired by the Bruce Lee movies of the 70s. His comic was titled Master of Kung Fu, so it figures that the fight scenes in the movie are extremely well done. If you've seen the trailers, you know there is a scene that takes place on a bus. I had seen the trailers and was waiting for the sequence, but was not expecting it to be as exciting as it was. The focus was less on the realism and brutality of fighting and instead on choreography. The characters' movements looked dance-like, as if they were more reflections of an internal emotional back and forth than a desperate struggle to stay alive, which brings us to the movie's other focus, as evident by the plot synopsis above. The film heavily focuses on familial relationships. Whether it's Shang-Chi's relationship with his father, sister, or mother, there is a strong exploration of what grief can do to a family. Will it irreversibly change people? Can grief ever be conquered completely? What is our responsibility to those who remain? All of these things are at least briefly explored. This isn't the only Marvel movie to touch on family. Thor, Guardians of the Galaxy, and even the Avengers movies all do so too. Part of the draw to superhero team movies is the dynamic and seeing people with great power have the same relationships that we do. However, this movie went beyond the surface level. Familiar themes of Avengers Endgame It's a true part of its DNA. Simu Liu, as played by Tony Leung, was a great villain with an unusual motivation personally. I'd say it handled family dynamics nearly as well as the Guardians of the Galaxy films. But that's just a matter of opinion. The visuals in this movie were a breath of fresh air from the usual big cities and bigger explosions that are usually found in summer blockbusters. I don't want to spoil all of the visuals, but they were generally influenced by Asian cultures. The dragon as seen in promos for the film is not so much of the Hobbit Harry Potter variety, but was much more colorful. None of the CGI was Thanos-level realistic, but was still energetic. I had a lot of fun seeing the fantastical worlds and creatures as they were introduced so far. Shani and the Legend of the Ten Rings has made a great deal of money, breaking Labor Day weekend records. With its opening weekend, the nearly all Asian cast is an accomplishment in the superhero genre that is being celebrated internationally. In theaters, if you're into action-adventure movies and are comfortable going into theaters, then go and see it. It seems like everybody else is other information about this film. There are two identity crises at the heart of Shani and the Legend of the Ten Rings. One is written into the narrative. Shang-Chi Simu is the son of an immortal crime lord, Tony Leung, who's rejected his father's empire for a simpler and less murderous life. Parking cars for a ritzy San Francisco hotel, his journey will be toward making himself whole again, reconciling his dark past with his good heart to forge a new way forward. The other lies with the film itself. Shani, directed by Destin, attempts to shake up the Marvel formula by infusing it with martial arts action and fairy tale fantasy and grounding it in Chinese and Asian American culture, and while its disparate elements don't meld together as smoothly as they should, they do in the end add up to a superhero movie fresh and fun enough to feel worth a spin. It doesn't take long for Shani to lay down its terms. The initial scenes of the film are set in China, with the opening narration and dialogue entirely in Mandarin with subtitles. It's not until the action moves to San Francisco, several minutes in, that we hear a single word of English, even in 2021, when subtitles are hardly an exotic experience for most moviegoers. The choice to use them in the opening scenes of an American blockbuster sends a message. Shani may be Marvel's first Asian lead character 23 films into the franchise, but he and his family won't be treated as novelties in their own movie. From there, Shani quickly distinguishes itself with its action, which emphasizes precision and agility over brute force, strength, or weightless CG trickery, though there's plenty of those as well, thanks to the 10 rings that grant its wearer's godlike power. The film's most thrilling set piece is essentially a hallway fight scene set on a speeding bus, and Liu looks the very picture of cool as he twists and swings and kicks his way through half a dozen henchmen, the camera breathlessly tracking his every move. But the character's martial arts training informs softer moments too, like a Wu-inspired meet-cute between Shani's parents, Tony Leung and Fa Chen, that takes on the flirty symmetry of a dance in scenes like the latter, which is set in a magical forest outside a hidden kingdom and involves the use of mysterious ancient artifacts. Shani barely feels like a superhero movie at all. If anything, it veers closer to the wistful grandeur of Disney's live-action fairy tale adaptations, alas, not even a warrior as gifted as Shani is capable of, breaking the Marvel mold completely. The franchise's quippy, self-deprecating sense of humor, which does so much to bring its characters back down to earth, no matter how extravagant their powers become, kicks in anytime Shani threatens to feel too epic. The jokes keep Shani from tipping over into self-importance, but they also rob it of some of its wonder. Elsewhere, the Marvel Cinematic Universe makes its presence even more pointedly known by way of cameos, references to the blip, i.e. the events of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, and an exhaustive explanation of what the 10 rings of this title has to do with the 10 rings from Iron Man 3. Then, of course, there's the requisite third act sky battle with shooting CG lights, predictably the least interesting. part of nearly every Marvel movie, including this one. Oh, and don't forget the 2 end credit scenes, which offer a tease of just how Shani might fit into future MCU sequels like the characters keep saying to one another. It's a lot to take in, and that's on top of an already overstated plot involving not just Shani's complicated relationship with his father, which is detailed via extensive flashbacks, but also an elaborate mythology delivered through a breathless exposition dump late in the movie. There's a low-simmer subplot about Shani's possibly romantic interest in his free-spirited best friend Katie Awkwafina, and a slightly more high-simmer one about his sister Meng'er Zhang, who's sick of being sidelined, which itself keeps getting sidelined since Shani additionally needs to make room for a slew of characters who don't even show up till after the halfway mark amid all this frantic plotting. Shang-Chi himself tends to get lost, as magnetic as Liu is. In action, he struggles in quieter moments with a script by Dave Callaham and Andrew Lamb that gives the character more backstory than personality. But he has a lifesaver in Liang, whose character Wu is the rare supervillain with a soul. Liang's sincerity lights up the love underlying Shang-Chi's convoluted origins and helps to ground the film's kookier flights of fancy, and he does all this without stealing the show from under Liu's Shang-Chi. It's in their scenes together that Shani's core ideas feel most fully realized. Strip away all that glossy superhero magic, and the film reveals itself to be the achingly familiar tale of a child figuring out how to bridge the gap between his parents' values and expectations and his own, in the same way that Shani itself tries to remix old tropes with new perspectives. It doesn't always succeed with flying colors, but as with a young hero still finding his footing, its valiant efforts feel worth cheering. All the same, someone will have to do the actual math, and I don't doubt that someone will. But if Shani and the Legend of the Ten Rings isn't the most action-oriented movie of the Marvel Cinematic Universe thus far, purely in terms of ratio of time spent watching, people beat each other up to time spent vamping in the interim, it has to rank somewhere near the top. This is saying a lot for a movie that does have a hefty dose of backstory to plow through, being a cross-generational culture forward origin story and family drama, a narrative with heavy lifts on the exposition front and a heap of traps to avoid on the cultural front. But this is also as it should be. I do actually go to an Iron Man movie wanting to see Robert Downey Jr. be a wise ass for 2 hours if he has to do it from behind a mask for a few scenes, so be it. Put the likes of Michelle Yeoh and Tony Leung in a movie on the other hand and attach it to a kung fu superhero, and my needs adjust accordingly. The promise of Shani, which is as much martial arts movie as it is standard superhero origin fare, is that a lot of people will get their asses kicked, sometimes gracefully, even beautifully, and other times with the battering ram power you can expect of a movie advertising 10 rings at play. Frodo just had the one, and it was enough of a pain in the ass. Inevitably, someone wants to unleash great evil upon the world, and someone else wakes up one day to realize that it's his fate, responsibility, and chore to be the guy who stops the other guy. The success of Shani and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which was directed by indie filmmaker Destin Daniel. Short-term 12 is that it manages to do everything expected of it, set up a new, and for many not terribly familiar, or because of dated stereotypes, not always fondly remembered superhero, break free of those aforementioned stereotypes by giving the cultural legacies at its center a little weight, satisfy audiences so used to the usual hero journey theatrics of origin stories that phoning it in with the usual just won't cut it anymore, and it accomplishes all of this efficiently and effectively enough that we indeed spend most of our time watching people duke it out on the sides of skyscrapers, in underground fighting rings, on San Francisco public transit, and elsewhere. It's a good movie. It's got a plausibly fearsome villain by way of Liang, a nice ensemble of heroic personalities played by Simu Liu. Even Awkwafina gets in a good kill when it counts, and a dose of actually poignant family drama undergirding all the rest, eh? forest maze that collapses in on people, dragons' souls getting sucked out of bodies, roles for women that are more than the standard gender-flipping lip service is a cherry on top. It's probably best to leave the intricacies of the life of Su Shangyilu to the movie. Suffice it to say, he and his sister Su Xiaoling Zhang descend from a legacy of power and myth in one corner. There's their mother, Ingli Falachin, guardian of the hidden village Talo, which buried in deep in a forest happens to be all that. Stands between humanity and its imminent destruction. In the other corner, their father, Su Wenwu Leong, a centuries-old warrior who, empowered by a mythical set of bangles known as the 10 Rings, has been able to hoard money and power. Around with governments, building his own army and the like, for years and years, he can't be defeated. Then he sets out to find Talo, the last frontier, for a man who has everything there he meets. Mom, and in one of the movie's most pleasurable scenes, a leaf-strewn bit of pleasing Wu fighting intercut with I. Think I'm in love with this woman close-ups. He gets his ass handed to him for the first time in centuries. Fast. Forward to the present, bad things have happened. Wu, who'd set aside his 10 rings for love, which entails becoming mortal, has been given good reason to traps back over to the dark side. And the kids that the couple had in the meantime, Shani Shan to friends, and Xiaoling have grown into masterful warriors in their own right. The young man, because his father saw him as the direct heir to the gap. 10 rings the young woman, because her father's lack of interest became in a skewed way an opportunity to train herself and fend for herself. When we meet adult Sean, he's a hotel valet in San Fran pretending to be a normal guy working alongside his girlfriend Katie. Awkwafina, and contentedly failing to make anything of himself. Xiaoling, meanwhile, runs a fighting ring in Macau. The siblings are estranged. Things are not allowed to remain that way. Of course, fates must be confronted, legacies wrestled with. At long last, part of the fun of Shani is that it goes through these motions with an actual sense of interest in them. The obvious setup of the thwarted daughter, the never-heir finally getting to have her say, doesn't just end there. It becomes a way of exploring an entire maternal legacy, akin to its own equally powerful way of being. And fighting the bad dad routine, unusually compelling thanks to Liang, grows more menacing with time, gnawing at Shani's sense of who he can even become given the things he's done and seen. A few recent notable movies about Asian American life, Crazy Rich Asians, The Farewell, and the like, have openly wrestled with the trope of younger generation Americanization and its consequent individualism, but against parental and ancestral ideals, immigrant ideals, the kinds of stories that make the children of immigrants feel terminally caught between two worlds. Shani doesn't sidestep those questions. Ultimately, family matters, ancestry matters, young people are expected to make something of themselves. But the movie's got questions about precisely those older ideals and counterpoints, and some refreshing variations. It's in this context that Xiaoling, stony and resentful at first for good reasons, emerges as more than just a side story. To Shani's overarching Chosen One journey, it's what makes a scene of Shani being trained by Talo guardian Ying Nan. You're not only a pleasure to look at, yo still got it, but interesting to think about. She's imparting a kind of wisdom. That life under the thumb of the 10 rings is too brutish to understand. The actual fights are satisfying, but they're almost too enamored of the wonders of splashy CGI to the point that the power of real physicality, even the practical, mystical power of great Wu effects in which reed-thin trees would barely buck under great warriors' weight, because that's grace gets muddled and deadened, so goes our harder, faster, louder era. The movie is trying to make sense in its own moment. The drama is built into these battles. The sense that something personal is always at stake. Make up for it to an extent. The movie is solid, even the Ben Kingsley bit, which is predicated on a pretty good in joke if you know your MCU history, doesn't totally wear out its welcome, but it comes close. And the leads, Liu and Zhang especially, make enough of their roles for me to crave a future for the franchise one that leaves the throat clearing of origin behind, if only to see how far they can go with it, or rather how far Marvel will let them go. More detail. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings will most likely be many people's first foray back to the cinema after over a year, and they won't be disappointed. Destin, Daniel Cretton's film, is action-packed, visually epic, with stunning cinematography and an engaging story to boot, plus the humor is spot on. I mean, when you have Awkwafina in a movie, you know it's going to be funny. This is a good introduction to new characters. Into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're in Phase 4 now. The old favorites can make an appearance, and we know this means our new hero is destined for Avengerhood. Simu plays the Animos, character likable and charismatic. Though like most heroes, he has a complicated past and family. Shang-Chi is introduced to us as Sean, working as a valet driver at a hotel in San Francisco with his friend Katie Awkwafina. Sean appears to live a normal life, but when he's set upon by assassins on a bus and he kicks ass with his awesome martial arts skills, things are not quite as they appear. Shang-Chi undergoes a journey of self-discovery, trying to figure out who he is, beyond what his father trained him to be his father. Suen Wu, by the way, is the real Mandarin Tony Li Young, and the owner of the 10 rings that give him great power. This movie stands apart from its predecessors due to its fantasy element. While, of course, all Marvel films are essentially fantasy, Shang-Chi incorporates Chinese lore and mythical creatures that have not existed before in the MCU. There is also a very modern vibe to this movie, very similar to that of Black Panther. This is in part because of a killer soundtrack visually. This is a powerhouse film. From the fast-paced martial arts to the slow-motion Tai Chi, Shang-Chi does not disappoint, while the story is slightly longer than it probably needed to be. It was a satisfying experience. The movie benefits from highlighting a range of characters and giving them the screen time to develop. Shang-Chi's father, Wu, is a domineering character, but with such love for his wife that it gives him some redeemability, Katie and Xiaoling. Shang-Chi's sister, played by Meng'er Zhang, are strong characters, and it is just as enjoyable to watch them find themselves as it is to watch Shang-Chi. One of the more subtle aspects of this film is the opening scene, the explanation of how our characters got to where they are in the present, narrated in Mandarin. It lends the film an authenticity and grounds it in Chinese culture. Shang-Chi brought me back to my childhood when I used to watch Jackie Chan films and marvel, no pun intended, at the style and skill involved. In martial arts, while Shang-Chi can pull off insane moves, he is the most normal, down-to-earth hero the MCU has had. It'll be interesting to see his character in future Marvel projects and to see what he and the Ten Rings get up to next. Being the first of anything comes with a lot of pressure and responsibility. Black Panther was the first film in the MCU to celebrate Black and African culture. Captain Marvel became the first women-led film in the franchise now. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings marks the MCU's first Asian-led superhero film. Of course, there have been characters of Asian descent in the MCU before, including Wong Benedict. Wong from Doctor Strange, Hogan Tadanobu Asano from Thor, and Jimmy Woo, Randall Park from Ant-Man and the Wasp and WandaVision, but they've always been the main hero's sidekick flunky or comic relief Shang-Chi. Features not only the first Asian protagonist, but also a predominantly Asian cast. Happily, Asians can collectively breathe a sigh of relief because the movie is good. Actually, it's really good after running away from his father, formidable crime lord Wu Tony. Liang Shani Simu starts over in San Francisco, where he meets his best friend, Katie Awkwafina, living the loafer lifestyle. Shani's daily rituals include breakfast with Katie's family, working a valet shift, and drinking and karaokeing the night away, basically living the good life. However, after 10 years, Shani's past finally catches up with him, driven by vengeance fueled by heartbreaking loss when Wu forcefully reunites with his son and daughter, Xiaoling Meng'er Zhang, in hopes of recruiting them along with Katie into his terrorist organization. The Ten Rings, an evil empire built around The power of 10 ancient rings that Wu wears around his arms to generate blasts of energy. Co-writer, director Destin. Daniel, best known for indie darling Short Term 12, understands family dynamics and beautifully sets the tone. For a heartwarming story, syringed with humor, but despite the humanity on show, it's the innovative martial arts that are the USP. Although there are many mystical elements, Shani thrives when the scenes are rooted in the real world, especially in its fight sequences. The action is fantastic thanks to Fight. Coordinator Andy Cheng and supervising stunt coordinator, the late Brad Allen, to whom the film is dedicated, the choreography the best yet in the MCU. A bruising bus battle between Shang-Chi and Wu's henchmen is even more hypnotic than the trailers suggest, Liu showing off a barrage of blistering moves to disarm his father's lackey. The action doesn't rely heavily on digital trickery in the real world, but even its CG set pieces within the fantasy realm of the hidden magical city of Talo, which Shani has mysterious ties to, do not diminish the beauty of the diverse fighting styles. These fight scenes are truly gratifying. The martial arts in an early sequence between WW and powerful warrior Zhang Li Fallen feel more like a dance, and the result is simply mesmerizing. The cast is stellar. Liu knocks it out of the park as Shani, adding a tad of levity to the known to be serious comic book character. As expected, Awkwafina hits all the comedic cues while remaining Shang-Chi's anchor through his journey of self-discovery. The chemistry between Liu and Awkwafina is palpable, exuding a real sense of a found family. Perhaps the most intriguing character is Shang Xiaoling, who has the most compelling backstory, but at times feels she is just there as set dressing for the main hero. It's unfortunate she isn't given more to do a dashing Liang, as Wu provides depths of character in what could be a one-dimensional bad guy. However, the film's real villain is grief. Grief drives Wu to perform nefarious acts, even at the expense of his own children. For those of Asian descent, grief is difficult to overcome in an early scene. Katie's mother comments on how moving on from a loved one is a Western idea as such. Liang's performance is filled with tangible anger and anguish that really brings the character to life. In the debit column, Shani does have some pacing issues where the story at times becomes convoluted with so much information to set up the world of Talo and how it relates to the MCU as a whole. The rushed ending makes some of the character arcs feel unearned and brushed aside also. It's a bit tiring to see another dragon trope involved in an Asian-led film, which is a shame, as there are subtle nods for the Asian diaspora to relish Shani taking off his shoes before entering Katie's home. Katie's grandmother asking Shani when he and Katie are getting married, and Ronnie Chang's mystery character telling Katie that he speaks ABC American-born Chinese that never feel forced or overplayed. It's a winning blend of Chinese culture mixed with the successful Marvel formula that avoids the typical Asian cliches and stereotypes of accents and bad drivers, while pointedly calling out some of the racial errors from Marvel's past. Given what's on show here, the future for Shani and Asian representation in the MCU looks bright. This film, directed by Destin Daniel, screenplay by Dave Callaham, Destin Daniel, Andrew Lamb, story by Dave Callaham, Destin Daniel, produced by Kevin Fetch, Jonathan Schwartz, starring Simu Meng'er, Yang Valin, Florian, Munteanu, Benedict Wong, Yunhua Michelle Yeoh, Ben Kingsley, Tony Leon, cinematography William Pope, edited by Nat Sanders, Elizabeth Ronaldold's daughter Harriam, music by Joel West. Production company Marvel Studios, distributed by Walt Disney Studios. Motion pictures release dates August 16, 2021 in Hollywood, Los Angeles. September 3, 2021 in United States, running time 132 minutes. United States language English, budget $150 to $200 million, box office $432.2 million. So guys, this is the review of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.